Greetings, Vancouver. Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. My name is Mike Zaremba, and I'm actually doing a solo podcast today. So I'm at the helm, and I'll be leading the charge here. So thanks for joining me. As always, we are podcasting here at a float house at 70 West Cordova Street in downtown Vancouver, BC. It's a beautiful early March morning, actually. We don't usually do too many podcasts in the morning, so it's kind of nice to throw that curveball in there, right?
Yeah, cool.
And
cool. Glad you could fit me in.
No, thank you for coming back. Actually, it was a mistake, but we had everything set up, and we forgot to record her last time, and you graciously took a float on us, and then came back a few days later. So thanks a lot for coming back, Rob. And I just wanted to address a couple things. One, I just want to send out a huge congratulations to Brian Rose of London Real, who is kind of our inspiration here, and he encourages us a lot to do what we're doing here at Vancouver Real. And he just recently published his TEDx talk that he, I think, spoke at maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, and that was just released last week. He did an amazing job. Just go to the London Real website, londonreal.tv, to check out, obviously, his podcast and his most recent TED Talk. So, Brian, if you're watching this or listening to this, congratulations. You absolutely crushed it, and it was very entertaining and it was just a very amazing story to share. So thank you so much with that. And actually, he gave us a little plug on it too at the end, so that was very gracious of him. So we've already had a few of you guys come and join us here, so thank you for subscribing, and thank you to everybody who listens and watches the show that we have here at Vancouver Real. So moving forward today, we're very fortunate to have with us Robert Murray, or Bob. You go by Rob or
yeah,
Robert?
No, Bob, yeah.
So Bob
Thank
Murray,
you.
and he's a proclaimed strategy Yoda and an author, a speaker, a transformational leader. He's actually partners with one of our past guests, Heather White. Mm-hmm. So you guys work together and kind of for the leadership development programs, correct?
That's right.
Just off the top, your website is robert-murray.com. So it's robert-murray.com. And then also the leader-within.com, same as Heather White's from a few episodes ago. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on, Rob, or Bob.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
And you're also an author. You've had a couple books come out. One's called It's Already Inside, Nurturing Your Innate Leadership for Business and Life Success. Mm-hmm. And you were just telling me just before we went on air that this was you self-published them originally, but now this one was just picked up, eh?
Yeah, it's just been picked up by a New York publisher called Morgan James just last week. So
cool.
They're going to do a second edition of it, and it should be coming out soon. I don't know what they do to it to get it into the second edition form, but it'll be out soon.
Yeah, do you think they'll be asking you to do any type of revision to another preface to it or something like that, or
maybe another preface? But the book's been accepted just as it is. So
sweet.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. So, and that was published in 2012. You said. So
yes.
It takes time with this book business a little bit, eh?
Yeah. There's so many authors out there, and however, it's and when you self-publish as well, the big thing is finding the money to do the PR.
Right.
Thankfully today we've got social media.
Yeah.
And I may have some gray hair, but I'm getting better at the social media thing.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Social media is an amazing tool for so many reasons, obviously. I think it's got its pros and cons, don't get me wrong, right? But people who are in your type of position doing what you're doing, kind of being an entrepreneurial distributing content sort of thing, you know what I mean? You go around with Heather's leadership development programs. People stand-up comics, they have the power now to promote themselves.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And that's it's really powerful. And so if you can kind of dedicate the time to it, and that's the thing, it does take a lot of time though.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Swallow you up sometimes.
Oh no, absolutely. And I'm glad you said it could swallow you up. And,
oh yeah.
And it just becomes all distracting from finding that balance that you need in your life as well.
Yeah. So it's one of those tools where you can you can really put endless hours into it. Mm-hmm. And really the more you put into it is the more you get out of it too. And we were at last week, there's social media mastery conference for the day put on by Ricky Shetty's a master blogger here in the city, and it was great. It was very informative to have all these experts come up on all the different platforms of social media and kind of share their kind of best practices and stuff like that. But it can be overwhelming too, like, so it's kind of best to focus on a couple and then give that your attention, because you can't do them all.
That's right.
I mean? So which ones do you do? Which ones do you kind of use to promote yourself?
Well, for business, especially for leadership, and and my audience is really senior leaders and executives and those that are up and coming. They're in their 30s. They've got some type of a business education, and they want to move their career further, faster, type of thing. LinkedIn really is it. So I spend more time on LinkedIn.
Right.
And then, depending on where you are in the world as well. I do, Heather and I work all over the world. And, you go to places like Eastern Europe, Facebook is it.
Facebook is it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. And then you go to other parts of the world and Twitter is it.
Right, right.
So you really have to be active on all three.
Cool.
And luckily we've got a Vancouver-based organization called Hootsuite.
Right.
Where you can just send out one blast and it picks up on all the social media platforms. So.
Yeah, and it's important to start leveraging those types of tools just to save your time. So, and actually, just reminds me. So your Twitter is at Robert S. Murray, RobertSmurray. So
That's
connect with him on Twitter, and also his Facebook page is Robert S. Murray as well. But today we're going by Bob. So
that's right.
But yeah, definitely reach out to him if what we get into today intrigues you at all. So. I want to go back, and let's take it back to maybe how you got to this position and how you came to be in Vancouver. Maybe you're always from Vancouver. Maybe take us back a little bit through some of your professional career, and even as far back as you want to go.
Okay.
It forms you to who you are today.
Yeah. Okay. That's it's a great question. Have I always been in Vancouver? No, I was born in Saskatchewan. However, I've been in Vancouver most of my life. Moved here, when I was still a small boy, and I was very, very blessed in the way that I was raised, and the values that were put upon me, and the work ethic of coming from a farm, that type of thing. I was also blessed to meet some great people along the way. As an example, when I entered grade 8, out in a small community outside of Vancouver called Port Coquitlam, I was classmates with Terry Fox.
Oh wow!
And so I went through high school with Terry Fox, and I was incredibly blessed to do some athletics with him, as well as just hanging around him, and the impression that he made upon me, even before he became famous for attempting to run all the way across Canada on one leg.
Sure.
He's an amazing guy, and he taught me about character. He taught me about attitude. And then from there, I learned a lot of really, really cool things, which have served me well in all through my life. One is that when I came out of high school, couldn't afford to go to university, so I took a job as an electrician. I became a journeyman electrician, and I worked at that all through my 20s, and I learned some really cool things. One is that tradespeople are the most innovative people on the planet. They can solve all sorts of problems,
right?
Usually without the proper equipment. And the other thing is tradespeople can work really well in teams.
Sure.
And so I took those two things, and when I turned 30, I went back to night school and got my marketing. Then I started to progress through different marketing roles, and by the time I was 39, I was leading a $200 million company.
Whoa.
So it wasn't cognitive education that got me there. It was the things that I learned, all the way going back to Terry Fox. It was the things like being able to work in teams and really harnessing the power of people.
Sure.
That enabled me to do that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an awesome point there, is that a lot of people are kind of stuck in that. A lot of young adolescents and into young adulthood are stuck in that standard narrative of, after high school, you got to get into university, and a lot of, like we were kind of talking about earlier too, that 70% chunk, that's what they're expected to do, that they should go into some sort of post-secondary education right after secondary school. And I mean, not everyone does that. I know there's few, but I think there's a vast majority that feel that pressure, that obligation to at least try to get into some sort of institution like that. And your story is just a prime example of that's not always. It doesn't have to be that way.
No.
It doesn't have to. There's no right or wrong way to kind of live a life. And
well, no, that's exactly it. And one of the things I always find is that it's much easier to get balance, and it's much easier to get lasting happiness in the relationships you want when you're chasing your passion. And if you chase your passion versus chasing a pension, then you're gonna find that the money will take care of itself, but then you'll also just be far happier.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true, and that's something I'm learning more as I kind of get into more the, I guess, kind of getting into the meat of my, I guess, my career, if you could say, is that especially exploring Float House and then even doing this podcast. Although this isn't something we do for revenue necessarily, but it is a marketing tool for us for sure, and it's something that I use for personal growth, and I just really enjoy it. I think it's a super fun, exciting part of my day to be able to invite people into the Float House here and to just have a chat with them and then put it out there, and then people respond, which is really cool.
And absolutely. I mean, and you as an entrepreneur, and whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in the executive suites of some corporation, everything that we do in life is all about people, and making those connections with people. And forums like this is fantastic for that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you're right. I think that's something I'm learning more as well, is that it's really the connections you're making to everybody that is paramount. I mean, that's going to really predict your success in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
How much you're connecting, and are you connecting with the right people at the right time for whatever you're trying to accomplish? All those types of things. So if you're trying to forge ahead by yourself to create something, you can do that, but I think bringing people on to have a second opinion, or to be an ear to bounce ideas off of or something, or to maybe introduce you to another topic or to somebody else that could help you with your project, all those things, like networking, communicate with people, which is something that, I'm sure you'd probably talk about communication as one of the cornerstones of leadership, I would imagine, eh?
Well, no, absolutely. Communication is, and this is something that took me a long time to learn, and it wasn't until I actually had teenagers of my own that I learned, what I found was sort of the secrets of communication. And I've had a very, very blessed career, and I've been able to be an executive with companies like TELUS, and I've been able to live in Europe and work as an executive with companies like Vodafone, thinking that I had all the answers.
Right.
But as I said, it wasn't until I had teenagers that I realized that the key to really, really connecting with people is communication, and the key to communication is listening.
Right.
Versus talking. And once I figured that out, I discovered that I was way more successful in what it is that I was attempting to do, just by listening to people more.
Yeah, and so what is it about the listening act that you find is so critical about, I guess, understanding what they're saying? And what's the difference between, maybe an active listening versus a passive listening?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of tips and tricks around all of that, but one of the things I discovered is that everybody on the planet has their own personal reason for why they do the things they do. And here at Float House, you've got hundreds of clients that come in here, and they all have their own personal reason for why they float.
Right.
I'm a client here of Float House, and I have my own personal reason for why I float. So if you take that thinking then to business and into life, everybody has their own purpose, their own why as to why they do things. And if you can actually take the time to stop talking and listen to other people and why it is that they do the things that they do, or why they believe in what they do, their value sets, then you can understand what it's going to take to motivate them. And whether it's active listening or passive listening, true deep focusing on the other person and trying to understand what makes them tick, that to me is one of the keys to communication. And I've discovered that when you do that, then people will follow you anywhere, because they trust you and they believe that you are looking after their best interest.
Sure. And I imagine too, it actually, it probably produces results ultimately. When people are clearly communicating and understanding, there's this less, vague interpretations and just that clarity. Clarity is efficient in a lot of ways.
Totally.
So
exactly.
So you were an electrician. You were, involved with marketing and all these, pretty high revenue volume companies, it sounds like. Then how did you get into where you are now? And maybe take us, also describe how did you get into this leadership role or leadership coaching kind of role, and just take us into that. And what do you do? Actually, that's what I was going to say. What do you do with your contemporary role?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, as I was working through various different roles in my 30s, one of the things I discovered was that I loved doing startups and I loved doing turnarounds. So businesses that were growing from nothing, from an idea, or businesses that were struggling. And it took almost the same process to work with those two different types of businesses, two polar opposites of business, but same structure and the same process was required for it. And I really loved doing it. And even when I was with TELUS as an executive there, I was still in the 98th percentile of entrepreneurs. So here I am working in a large corporation, but I had this entrepreneur mindset, and I just loved to work on these projects and companies I would call a project.
Sure.
When I left TELUS and moved to Europe to work with Vodafone, I had the same love for taking things that were brand new or things that were less than perfect, and fixing them, or in the beginning stage doing a startup. That both of them required strategy, really good, simple strategy that was clear, that was compelling. And so from all that process, I learned to become a bit of a strategist, and not the conventional term strategist. I take strategy and I try to make it as simple as possible. I love Einstein's quote. Einstein had a quote that was, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself.
Right, yeah.
And so I always take something that's really, really complicated and I try to make it as simple as possible so that people can understand it and they'll follow it. I discovered, when I was living in Europe, that corporate life is well, as much as I was excelling in it, it just didn't float my boat, kind of thing. It just wasn't, there was more to it, and I wanted to work with people, and I wanted to teach and mentor, and I wanted to develop leaders.
Right.
So I decided that, after I hung it up from a corporate perspective, I was going to start a practice that does that. One that focuses on companies that need help turning around, and the other one is focusing on people that want to be more than what they are, or that they're struggling finding that, that what makes them relevant in this crazy complex world we're in.
Right. Do you find, are you working more with the corporate side, or is it kind of even split between individuals and
it's kind of even split. I mean, my consulting practice is that, I work with a couple of different organizations from a turnaround perspective, and then the joint venture that I have with Heather White, called The Leader Within, we work with large corporates for the most part.
Right.
And we'll go in there, we work with their middle to senior executive level managers, and we work with them to teach them the things that they never learned in school.
Interesting.
And that they're struggling with as a leader.
Let's get into that.
Okay.
Let's get into that a little bit. What do you find that some things are not being taught in our current education system? What are the more common things you guys discover in that realm?
One of the most common thing that we discovered is that what is being taught is how to go into deep analysis and very, very left brain cognitive things. So when people come out of business school, they come out as managers. They're able to manage processes, policies, procedures. What they're not good at is emotionally connecting with people, and really, really connecting with people on an emotional level. Because at the end of the day, every human on the planet makes their decisions emotionally.
Yep.
They pick the spouses that they're with emotionally. They pick where they live. It's all based upon emotions. The cars that they drive.
Right.
And so human beings make decisions emotionally. So when then do we forget, as a manager or a business person, that employees are also humans and that they make their decisions emotionally? So if you want people to move from point A to point B, you need to connect with them emotionally, and that is the key thing that's missing out there.
Interesting.
And that's what we work on, is teaching leaders how to first and foremost emotionally connect with themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And then take that learning to emotionally connect with other people.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you can say that for a lot of people in this, just in our society in general, is I think we're not taught that very much, and unless you have really kind of conscious parents that kind of take that role upon themselves, you're kind of left to figure it out for yourself if you do.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And then you start to, and a lot of it hinges on who you kind of become associated with and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I know personally, the emotional intelligence element of growing up is something that it doesn't kind of formulate to, if you're lucky, probably in your mid to late 20s, more or less, and if that even. But
and I was a slow learner. It didn't hit me until I was in my 40s. But
right.
It's and I worry, and my fear right now is that with the way that we're disconnecting from the world, and we talked at the beginning of the show about social media and how it's been great for helping people promote. It's also been a detriment because I'm seeing people disconnect from reality.
Sure.
And really a lot of what you do in your own personal social media stuff is not reality.
Yeah.
We're approaching a point where we're disconnecting and we're not getting emotionally connected with people.
I think you're right. I think there's a huge, and I'm sure there's lots of people kind of researching this now and doing publications on it. I haven't done a lot of that type of reading, but I could just imagine that a lot of the psychological, emotional, kind of suppressions or upheavals or turmoil that people are facing are starting to probably like seep into the whole social media realm, and they're projecting only elements of themselves they want to show, and so they're starting to create this false person online that they probably feel obligated to live up to in their real life, and they're setting themselves up for failure almost. And then on top of that, you're right, then they're not even like communicating with people face to face.
That's just so stressful, and so then it becomes all consuming, and we forget to do things like just disconnecting. And that's why I love coming and floating here at the Float House, because and I don't even do it as much as I want to. It's simply because it's 90 minutes where you're by yourself with your thoughts, and the clarity that comes from just that short period of time for me is I walk out of here and every neuron in my brain appears to be firing at the same time. It's just because of the clarity that I've gotten from being quiet and being by myself and alone with my thoughts and connecting with myself emotionally, which then makes me a way better person.
Totally.
When I get out of here.
Yeah, it's by going into that introspective space and having that time, your body knows what it needs to do. If you give it the space and like the stillness and the silence to let it do that, your mind will start to go through all the things that it needs to go through, and it kind of like defragging your computer, like scrubbing things clean, almost like it's like a clarity mechanism. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, you get a lot of clarity out of it, because when you can disconnect and just let things settle for a second, instead of moving from one thing to the next, we're able to kind of just help that consolidation process a little bit more,
Exactly.
And it's I think that's what a lot of people are getting out of it for the most part. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, that we're seeing a lot of consistency and commonality from the usage with it, so and did you float before you started coming to Float House? Is this something, because I know like it's been popular back in like the early 90s and stuff like that. Were you part of that initial wave at all?
No, the way I still do disconnect is through exercise and solo exercise. I'm an endurance athlete, so either by doing long distance running, training for a marathon, or long distance swimming. So I do spend a fair amount of time by myself, alone with my thoughts, for my morning workouts. Floating for me is just a new idea within the last year. I've been aware of it for a long time. I think just ever since that movie, the John Hurt,
Altered States.
Altered States, and so I've been aware of it, and just quite simply, I got given a gift to come here and float by my wife and my daughter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they bought me a gift card, so I came here and I got into it, and I loved it.
No, that's awesome. I think it is a very unique modality for it, but I think you're right. There's other ways to do it as well. There's, whether it's through endurance, exercise, or just getting out into nature, or just giving yourself that time, or painting, giving yourself that time to be with yourself and be comfortable in that space. It just helps you to connect with your emotional side a little bit. And that's probably, you're right, like when you're going into that leadership development, like probably start prying into their lives, like what do you do to connect with yourself, right? Because that's probably where it begins a lot.
And most people don't. And so that's why when, and it's interesting because we work with senior leaders and executives, and they have trouble connecting emotionally with people because they have trouble connecting emotionally with themselves.
Yeah.
They're incredibly driven to climb the corporate ladder or whatever that is, to move their career along. They're incredibly driven, and sadly most of them have done it at the expense of others, versus truly understanding their themselves and why they want to do things. And those are the ones that are then able to connect better with people. So we just start peeling away the layers of the onion when we work with executives in our leadership development, and by starting with them.
Right.
And it's funny because, when Heather and I have worked with some teams, at the end of day one, usually the beginning of day two, we've had some really, really hardened executives and leaders in tears.
Wow. Interesting. And is it just because of like a self-realization?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've come to the realization that there's something that's missing in their life, or people that they've not paid attention to in their life, and that that they have to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's you're touching into just the general notion of mental health, and how, I mean, I think mental health is starting to have a little bit of a better positive connotation, and like, yeah, you should be aware of your mental health and how your emotional health and those things. Whereas before, it was never one. It was, I mean, when I was in high school and early in university, no one talked about your mental health state. At least not people I associated with, you know what I mean, and not that I encountered with.
That was a taboo stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very like taboo, and now I think it's coming around. But like, are you aware of your mental health? So it's a natural evolution that I think we need to address, but it's still in its infancy for sure. In a lot of ways, and it's going to take time and a process. But ultimately, I think if people are able to connect with themselves, they'll be able to just be a more complete person. And I wanted to get into with you and ask you, like, you're talking about this, this crazy drive that people have. I mean, this is just my personal opinion, do you think that could be like masquerading as something deeper that they're ignoring, almost like that really hyper like competitive drive of excelling? I mean, is there a difference between that and then like your passionate pursuit, almost, is what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, wow, that's a huge subject. One of the things that I come from an athletic background, so I was driven from a really, really young age, mostly by myself, by nobody else, to be the best that I could be. And you can see I'm no giant in terms of my stature, but I always picked sports like hockey, to attempt to excel at. And I was driven by that desire to be the best, and I have no idea where that came from. I had a great childhood. There's nothing I was trying to compensate for. There was nobody I was trying to appease, or to please. I think that was just something that was already inside me. And then when I moved into corporate life, the next job was I was back in the hockey ice arenas, and it was that next job was the thing that I had to master, and I had to capture. And it wasn't until I got into the executive suites and, in large companies, where I sort of sat back and realized that, wow, okay, I'm here. Right.
Yeah. You realize, you kind of had that revelation, like, I've arrived now.
Yeah. I've arrived and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't everything that I thought it would be. And I was leading large groups of people, thousands of people that, I was responsible for. However, I'm thinking to myself, what's the purpose? What is my purpose? And what is the purpose of all the people around me? So that's the thing that I started to question, and I came to this realization that my real purpose was to help people and to help companies discover their remarkable potential. And just because I was sitting in an executive suite didn't necessarily mean that I was going to be able to do that.
Right.
And one of the things I discovered in large companies is that even as an executive, you have very little influence over the direction of the organization.
Sure.
Whereas with smaller organizations, and that's one thing I discovered and loved, since coming back to Vancouver, is that these smaller organizations that are $10 to $50 million, they have so much to offer the world, and at the same time as they have so much that they need in terms of help, and they listen and they want it.
Right. So do you find that kind of size of companies you find are really interesting to work with because they're just so dynamic, and they have this massive potential, like because they kind of have like a good probably base to work from and a good idea and lots of passion because it's not too diluted yet or anything like that. But but like you said, but they now, especially with the world of the internet, they can make significant global change potentially if it all kind of aligns and they really get their things on a good path.
I absolutely love working with organizations that are that size simply because they got to where they are on pure passion and energy, and everybody believing in the idea and the dream. Then they get to a certain point where all of a sudden, their annual revenue goes flat, but their costs are continuing to increase. What they don't realize is that, passion and energy is only going to take them so far, and what's missing is to have now, you need to be scalable, and you need to have sort of that replicable structure brought in, and that's something that I help them with, and I help them come up with a simple strategy, and then building up that great culture that they had, and using that great culture to become one of their distinctive advantages. It's just a tough world that we're in.
Sure.
We've got emerging countries coming on stream that have more highly educated people than we have people.
Right. Wow.
And they're willing to work for a lot less money. So we have to be, we're never ever going to be able to compete on price with the world. In the Western world. So what we have to be is we have to be smarter, we have to be faster, and we have to deliver more value. And I love working with those size companies because they get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's something I never even thought of, is that, these emerging countries have super educated people and tons of them willing to work for less.
Absolutely.
What man, I'm just trying to think out loud now, like what could be the repercussions of that towards, I'm thinking all these things about my immigration and all that kind of stuff, and like, is the government obviously aware of that and trying to control the rate of immigration flow into the countries? But the things can be outsourced easily over the internet too, though, right?
Everything can be outsourced, well, except for coming for a float. But
right.
I think just general business terms. In 2012, when the book first came out, the It's Already Inside first came out, I went to India twice, and I was, in different parts of Asia, and what I saw there was, as you said, exactly, highly educated people, very, very smart, driven because of the poverty that they've grown up in. So they sort of they've had a taste of the Western world and seen what our standard of living is. They want that too.
Interesting.
And so there's no shortage of people that will do virtually anything for next to no money.
Wow.
And they have access to all sorts of raw materials. So if you think that your software development business in North America, or your manufacturing business, or whatever other traditional business that you're in, only has local competitors, then you're sadly mistaken.
Right.
The world is completely flattened now, and we have to, as leaders, we have to be incredibly tuned into that, and then figure out, well, okay, how am I going to build a team of people that get that as well and want to go on this journey to create tremendous value.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Do you think that there's also potential in that as well as of taking that just a globalized approach to your business? Like do you find people kind of get locked into a single city or country kind of thought, or even just a continent thought, whereas they should really start to look abroad? Or I imagine once you get to higher numbers, then the bottom line just kind of makes sense. So you naturally start exploring other opportunities to foreign markets and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
You're absolutely right. We have to think that there is no such thing as traditional anymore.
Yeah,
it's completely non-traditional. I look at, take simple things like engineering, and I'm going to make this really, really simple. And that with Google Maps, you could have an professional engineer in India using Google Maps to look at various landscapes and in geographies, say in Canada, for example, and they can come up with a design, whether it's an architectural design or an engineering design, without ever even visiting here. And then building the entire design up. In emerging countries now, they're doing medical imaging. If you went in for an MRI, say here in Vancouver, that MRI could be read by a doctor in India.
Right.
Your taxes can be prepared by an accountant in India. It's just like, if you're in the services world,
right,
and even in the product world, the world is flat. And so now, okay, well, how do you compete with that? And so, yeah, one strategy is to look for, okay, well, let's look beyond our borders and see what value we can create and deliver to other parts of the world without actually physically going there and setting up an operation. Or what is it that we can do for our customers here that delivers way more value for them than someone in India who can do it for a quarter of the price.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. No. So these kind of things that you start to broach with your leaders, especially when those turnaround companies, like things that they're kind of stuck and they need to change directions a little bit, to start to explore those avenues, I assume?
Absolutely. Cool. We always start with, okay, what is it that you do better than anyone else? And the world's largest company is probably the best example, which is Apple. And Apple does what they do better than anybody else, is that they create a product that is easy to use, it's beautiful, right down to the packaging. It's perfect.
It's true. It's crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy how the intense focus they put into the product development.
Yeah.
So much so that people will pay $2,000 for a MacBook when they could get the same Dell does exactly the same thing for $800, $700.
Yeah.
But because of the focus that they put into their greatness, so then that's what I then take to every other organization and say, okay, well, what is your greatness? What makes you different than everybody else? And then, as opposed to trying to be all things to all people, focus intensely on that greatness.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. That's something that we try to focus on here at Floathouse is, instead of getting involved with other modalities of, relaxation and therapies, be it massage or acupuncture or whatever you want to bring into yoga, there's something to just getting as best as you can at one thing, which for us is floating, and trying to make that float experience, like inside the tank, as consistent and as perfect as we can make it. There's lots of variables, but we want to make it so that the biggest variable is the individual, and that the tank is it's always going to be more or less the same, and then the person that goes in, it's really on them. It's kind of funny sometimes when people have their experience and they start kind of almost nitpicking at little details of the float of why they were distracted or why it wasn't enjoyable of some sort. You know what I mean? When we go and double check the temperature, and we know how the tanks are. We float in them all the time, and so I think people can make distractions based off of what they don't want to get into. But
here's let's peel away the layers of the onion on that, in terms of this is the essence of strategy right here.
Right.
Is that you mentioned a couple of times the experience, and that's when people come to a place like Floathouse, they're coming here to buy an experience.
Right.
And that experience to them is different for each individual because they have different needs and different reasons for being here.
Right.
And so, some type of a distraction is, and you're trying to make it as perfect as possible for as many people as possible that come here. However, on one hand, there's some people that you just never will be able to please.
Totally.
They may not be your customers. The other hand is that the experience really starts before they even get in the tank. The experience is what I call, the moments of truth for the Floathouse, is that every piece of social media, every piece of everything that's on your website, every piece of print media, everything that gets said out there is a moment of truth for people that are either clients or prospects for you. When they come into the Floathouse, how are they greeted? What's the environment like? What is, how do they feel when they're here? And then then that leads to the experience when they're actually in the tank. And a lot of things that'll happen in the tank that might be distractions for them, they don't pay attention to because all the other moments of truth have been brilliant.
Totally. Yeah.
And then when they come out, just the space that you guys have for them to relax and chill before they go back out there into the chaos of the world.
Right.
That's all part of the experience.
Yeah. And that's, we put a lot of thought into, you're right, the whole experience from beginning to end, from the initial time they lay eyes upon us online, most likely, to the time then they're sipping their tea after their float. You know what I mean? Like everything in between there, and that's something that that's why it's almost like we don't want to focus on anything else, because there's so much into that as it is. The details that need to go into it is like, they're like within our one service of floating, there's an infinite number of details anyways. So it's just right. Like, okay, well, how so I'd rather focus on the one, create the ultimate float experience versus a good float experience and a good yoga experience. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know what I mean. It's just more things. It's like, what do you want to do? What's your intention? What's your what are you kind of trying to accomplish?
Well, no, exactly. And so one of the things I, from a strategy point of view, is that I would just stay focused on the experience that people have from beginning to end. And, you come back to the Apple experience, right? Sure. The engineering that they put into it in the beginning, all the way to the plastic wrapping that they put around the box.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy when you open like your new phone and like the box is so perfectly fit that it like just slowly by the release of gravity comes out.
And that's part of,
they like calculate that for sure.
They do, and they actually have a word for it. It's the out-of-box experience.
There you go.
And so and all the way through that's what they design into it. And then so that's what I urge companies as well, is to discover your greatness and then engineer that experience or that greatness so that it is delivered as flawlessly as possible, as often as possible.
So let's take that to you and Heather then. How do you guys take that idea and for what you guys provide a client or a team or a corporation? How does that work into what you guys do?
Well, and exactly. So the way we approach it is that we approach it purely from a customer intimacy point of view, is that we work really hard in uncovering what's going on in the organization that creates this need for them and their leaders to have development, to have coaching, to have mentoring, what's going on in there. So truly understand what's going on in that business. Then from there, we've got a couple of simple strategies. One is that, we have a mindset of service. We call ourselves servant leaders.
Okay.
And the other thing is discover wow, or deliver wow wherever we go. So when we really understand what's going on with the business, then we really work hard at understanding what's going on with the leaders, and then delivering moments of truth for them that then when they go home at the end of the day or at the end of the week, sometimes they spend a week with us off in residency somewhere. Wow. They go like, wow, that was the best day, or wow, that was the best week of my life. And we've had a number of people email us afterwards and say exactly that. That was the best 3 days of my life.
Cool.
And I'm thinking, wow, better than getting married, better than watching the kids being born. Yeah. And we've had people in tears of happiness. Sure. Simply because we help them so much move forward in terms of their own discovery, and then discovering that taking that personal discovery and making, creating a better leadership environment for the people that report to them.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think because what you guys are getting into there is like you're helping people uncover any lies they're giving to themselves. Like the ultimate betrayal I think anyone can do is to betray yourself, and that's why they'll literally say, it was like the best 3 days of my life, because if you're betraying yourself, then you can't be true to your partner, you can't be true to your kids. You know what I mean? Like there's a part of you that you're shutting down, you're not fully aware of or expressing. Then that's like the ultimate betrayal. Like you have to check. You have to be selfish at some point. For the good of all, though.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
And we of course we take some cognitive and tactical things that we work with the leaders on. Like we teach them how to be transformation change agents. We teach them how to develop simple strategy. We work with them to to be better speakers. As an executive or as a senior leader, how do you speak and communicate better to any audience anywhere?
Right.
And, so those are pretty tactical things. But before we even get into that, we basically strip them down in terms of discovering what's going on inside them, and then and they discover fears that have been deeply embedded, and they've been harboring those fears for years. And so when we uncover those and create an awareness around it, it makes them way better at strategy. It makes them way better at speaking to people. It makes them way better at crisis management.
Right. And then what do you find, like when someone uncovers a fear, like they realize they've been behaving in a way or doing something motivated, probably out of more of a fear-based standpoint, what do you do from there? Like, okay, you've discovered, like, okay, I think this is a fear-based thing, and then what do you how do you move on from that? How do you move forward from that point?
We just give them some simple tools that they can work with. I mean, some people, at the worst case, they need to get some help. So we help them come to that realization that, they need to go and work with someone.
There's more talking to be done.
Yeah, there's more talking, more uncovering, and we, that's where Heather's a brilliant coach. And she takes on a lot of people in terms of coaching, from a leadership mentoring piece. That's where I kind of step in and say, okay, well, you use the gray hair and battle scars, which came from making a ton of mistakes,
right?
And I help mentor those people along.
Cool.
We also find, though, a lot of the stuff is not that complex.
Right.
They've been complex from the fact that that they've been hiding it, and it's not helping them move forward, or that fear is creating them a behavior in them that is, causing them to be the crappy leader that they are. And then simply by having the awareness, you can make better choices.
Yeah. Wow.
Which gets you better results.
Yeah. So that's why I think once you kind of dipping into the personal development part of your life, I don't think you'll ever be like, I'm here, but you should also recognize what you have accomplished as well, and to just appreciate when you have kind of just brought the awareness to it. It's like be grateful that you have the awareness of whatever it is, even if it takes time or the rest of your life to kind of overcome it, or you never overcome it, but at least they have the awareness. It already, like you're saying, it's going to transform it, that transformational change agent. I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. Let's get into when you guys, I'm always curious to find out, because I'm sure you guys do a lot of public speaking. Do you guys, first of all, this is a side question, do you guys ever speak together at the same time on stage? Like do like a tandem,
we haven't.
Boom, boom,
We've
boom?
been we haven't.
Because I know Heather's an excellent speaker. I'm sure you are as well. I haven't seen you speak at all, but I always think it'd be cool to see like this double dynamic, just boom, like back and forth. Something you guys really work on.
We've talked about
polished.
it. Yeah, we've talked about it. And it's something that we've got planned for the future is for us to do a joint keynote. Yeah. We have shared the stage though in a lot of places in the world, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by plan.
Right.
Whereas she'll do a separate keynote and I'll do a separate keynote, our talks are really, really different in terms like, I approach things from, I'm a storyteller. Cool. So I'll tell stories about growing up with Terry Fox, or I'll tell stories about the time I accidentally was running around the lake up in Kelowna with Billy Idol, and I didn't know Billy Idol was beside me when I was running with him, and the conversation that we had.
Right.
I tell stories about, what strategy had to do with climbing Kilimanjaro. One time I accidentally got arrested by mistake in Hong Kong at the airport.
Oh no.
And I spent 8 hours in handcuffs in a jail cell.
Crazy.
So I tell stories about that and what it's got to do with leadership.
Sure.
Whereas Heather talks about the emotional side and what's going on inside of you when you're afraid of moving forward, or you're afraid of taking a risk, or you're afraid of change. Yeah. What's going on inside your head that's causing that? Have you always been comfortable as a public speaker? Totally. Yeah. Well, except at my wedding. Oh, really? That was a long time ago. But no, I just through the jobs that I had to speak a lot. So you get really, really comfortable being in there, and I love it. I love telling stories, and I love being in front of people. So So Heather and I, we do keynotes, but we've never done it together, and that is a huge part of our plan, though, is someday to do that.
What do you give as advice to people who are trying to work on their public speaking skills and developing that part of their life, just whether it's for professional purposes or just for personal development purposes?
Well, yeah, I guess the easiest advice I can give you is that, buried deep inside of a brain is what I call the lizard brain. Mm-hmm. And the lizard brain is there to protect us. It's from 100,000 years ago when there was real threats to our safety every single day. So the lizard brain was there to protect us. And it protects us in such a way that it reminds us of all the things that have gone wrong in the past. So now you're about to take the stage, whether you're in front of 10 people in a meeting or whether you're in front of 1,000 people. And your lizard brain will be there telling you that, okay, Mike, remember the last time you did this, you were embarrassed or somebody said something or, somebody gave you some negative feedback. All of these things are being pumped into your conscious mind when you're about to step onto the stage. So recognizing that for what it is, and it's just this ego or this lizard brain that's trying to protect us and saying, great, thank you for sharing. I'm going to do great, and switching the positive or the talk to positive self-talk.
Right.
And because at the end of the day, I've never seen anybody die from public speaking.
No, exactly.
Even though it's one of our number one fears is public speaking. Yeah. But I've never seen anybody die from it. Yeah. And if you go up there and you know your material really well and you realize, you keep telling yourself that the 1,000 people that are out there, none of them want to be up here.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm up here. I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I'm loving what I'm doing, and I've got a great message to share with people. Yeah. And that's what I think about, and that's what I counsel other people to think about as well around that fear of public speaking.
Do you prepare a lot for your talks? Like, do you find, is that part of your process, just your personal way of doing it?
Depends on what it is.
Sure.
So a lot of my talks aren't, I don't use a lot of numbers and data and facts. And if I have to at all, then I'll prepare for it. My talks of all are based on stories, and the stories all have a leadership meaning.
Right.
Which and because I've lived the stories, it's really easy for me to stand up.
Yeah, you just tap into the memories of what was going on.
It's real easy to stand up there.
Cool.
Yeah, but the only preparation that I'll do is before I go on stage is that I have a set routine that I follow, very much like a professional athlete. Before a big game, they have a set routine, right?
Can you share that with us?
My routine is really, really simple. I eat the same thing, which is a really, really healthy diet that's lean protein, complex carbohydrates, no sugar, lots and lots of water, and then I listen to a set playlist of 10 songs.
Okay.
That always ends with the Beatles' Hey Jude.
Oh, okay.
And I time the playlist for me to get to the stage.
Interesting.
So I know that it's about 45 minutes. So 45 minutes before I'm going to be on stage, I'll put the playlist on, listen to the 10 songs. It always ends up with Hey Jude.
Interesting. And what is that purpose of the playlist? What does it do to you? How does it serve you through that process? What does it do for you?
It's interesting because it's an eclectic mix, and I don't want to share all the songs that are on it, but they all mean something to me. And they all mean, whether you call it neurolinguistic programming or whatever it is, it takes my mind back to a time when I was happiest or when I was confident. I felt that I was strong. I felt that nothing could defeat me, and those were the songs that happened to be playing or were played shortly therewhen that particular feeling.
Interesting.
It's
a little life hack then, a little biohack.
That's exactly what it is. I when I was in my early 20s, I learned how to fly, and I remember the very first day that I did my first solo flight.
Cool.
And how nerve-wracking and just sheer terror that was.
Whoa.
But after I landed and walked away from the landing, all on my own for the very first time, and I got in my car and I drove home, there was a song playing. So that song's part of my playlist.
Right, you're probably just endorphins just pumping out of your ears at that point,
Yeah. And whenever I hear that song, it takes me right back to that moment.
Crazy.
So I'm thinking, so now I go to take the stage and think, well, I just, for the very first time in my mind, I'm thinking, if I, for the very first time, landed a plane on my first solo flight all by myself, there was nobody else there, standing in front of all these people, that's easy.
Yeah. What was that like? So do you still fly? Are you still piloting?
Yeah. Cool. So it's a love, because one of my top value is freedom.
Sure.
And when I'm flying, I feel free.
Really?
I feel totally free.
Wow. Have you ever tried gliding?
No, I want to though.
Yeah, because I imagine that would because without the hum of the engine,
silence,
I couldn't even imagine. It'd probably be like
amazing,
very powerful, probably.
Yeah, it would be.
But I mean, flying alone is still equally like. I mean, I can't. Yeah, when you're up there, you just how can you not have a different change in your consciousness, because you're seeing the world from literally the bird's eye view.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I can imagine. How long have you been a pilot for now?
30 plus years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you try to get out like seasonally then, basically? Like,
I'm a fair weather pilot.
Yeah.
Because I just don't have enough time with my job and traveling around the world. It's just, at my stage, the type of flying I do is too stressful to fly in crappy weather. So.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, so it's very like recreational for you then?
Totally.
Cool. Very cool. And what are you allowed? Like, how big of a plane can you fly?
I'm only licensed for single engine.
Single engine plane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up to a certain weight.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. How long does it take to get a pilot license?
The rules have changed a lot since I got my license, and you'd be shocked that I got my license in 1 month.
Oh wow!
I took a month off of work. And I flew every single day.
Right.
And crammed like crazy at night into the books.
Right.
And it took me a month. You can't get away with that today.
Yeah, things have changed.
Things have changed.
The red tape police have come around that. I'm sure, just like everything else.
You know, it was at a time when there wasn't as much focus on. There's always been intense focus on safety.
Of course.
But just there wasn't all the other pressures that pilots have to put up with as they do today.
Yeah. Do you look back, and I'm going to spin this into something else, but do you look back on like, you know, are you a good pilot? Like, did it work for you?
Never crashed.
Right. So, I mean, you know.
Never killed anybody.
I'm kind of getting into that realm of overcomplexification. You know what I mean? And like you said, like I want to strip it down to the simplest form. Let's take things to a simple form. And you know, I wonder, is there an element, a con of over-complexification within our society, for good or for bad? I don't know, you know?
Yeah, you know, when I can't speak for commercial aviation because that's a whole different form of flying.
I'm talking in general, the pattern in our society.
One of the things I learned about flying, you know, when I was a student, which served me well for a whole bunch of things. One, you know, for leadership, crisis management, strategy, is that pilots never leave the ground without a plan.
Sure.
They never leave the ground without knowing where they're going to go, and if the plan doesn't work out, what is my alternative? Whereas a lot of people in business and in life will just blindly leap into something, and sometimes you'd have to do that.
Right.
But a pilot will never do that. The other thing is that when something goes wrong up in the air, pilot will follow a very simple plan. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, first and foremost, get control of the airplane, find a place to land the airplane. Very, very simple, easy to remember. Yeah. You know, they don't pull out a 400-page manual on the plane and go start flipping through and going, I wonder what caused that problem. Yeah. You know, they will. It's intense focus. Land the plane. Yeah. Figure it out later. And so you take that into leadership around crisis management. Yeah. And there's crises that pop up all the time. Right. Well, we can lose our head about it, or we can choose to not panic. Mm-hmm. And we can choose, and when we don't panic, we think better. Right. So then when we choose not to panic, then we can follow that simple process.
Right. Do you think that comes into like having a set of core values, or just something that like ultimately anchors yourself or your business in like a philosophy of some sort, so that when something does spontaneously, a crisis does occur, you fall back to what are we doing, and what is our ultimate purpose to kind of help you guide yourself through that storm, perhaps?
Yeah, you know, values may play a part in it. We all have different values. I think what plays more of a role in it is when a crisis pops up, we can allow that lizard brain to take over, you know, and react to all of the adrenaline and cortisol that's flowing through our body. Mm-hmm. Or we can choose to take a deep breath and say, okay, let's just work through a simple process, whether it's, you know, get control of the plane, find a place to land and land the plane. Yeah. But the key is just taking that deep breath and saying, okay, we're going to get through this. and there is a solution here. And not thinking about the problem, thinking about the solution. And that takes a tremendous amount of discipline.
Sure. Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that, I'm guilty of one of those people that have, not always been able to get calm and centered when things get crazy, you know what I mean? But
we all are.
Yeah, you're right. That lizard brain it's a powerful mechanism to try to start to develop some, not control, but maybe on some levels, a control over almost, to recognize it for what it is, but don't let it influence you as much as you need, because it can make irrational decisions at times. I would imagine,
Absolutely.
Right? So,
yeah, for sure.
I want to get into, kind of your life now. Like, what do you do to challenge yourself in these days? Like, how important is it to challenge yourself? Do you look at things like that?
Yeah, no, I do. I challenge myself for, in a whole lot of areas. I've always challenged myself athletically. And I'm in my 50s now, so I can't do the same thing that I could when I was your age. But I still challenge myself. I still push myself, and I still don't look at. I don't have that thinking that that's too far, or that's too hard for somebody my age. I don't look in the mirror, and I do it. And it's part of my DNA, but at the same time, it's also what I love doing. I love to push myself to see how far I can go. And, that helps me as well in terms of when I get into things like a crisis for a client, or, for my own business, and saying, okay, well, great.
Right.
It helps me with solutions.
So a lot of your challenges now, you kind of self-induce them through athletic, just tasks or challenges to push yourself mentally, push yourself physically, because that it sounds like you kind of enjoy them, but also the fact that it's good. It's a good training ground to be able to apply when you need to.
No, absolutely. Let's say if I'm in the pool and I'm working my way up to doing a long distance swim, it's
what's long distance for you?
8K.
Okay. How long does it take to swim 8K, roughly?
For me, it would take me almost 3 hours.
Okay, yeah, that's exhausting. Like last summer, I had some back problems, so I decided to go to the pool to keep my fitness up a little bit, And I've been a swimmer like all my life, not in terms of like a competitive swimmer, but I'm definitely like a water baby in a lot of ways. I've been very comfortable in the water, scuba diving, snorkeling since I was 3 years old, literally. Wow. So I went to the pool, to exercise my heart, my lungs, and that, and it's an amazing workout.
It is,
and a very and I think I'm not sure if we talked about this on the podcast or before the podcast, but how it's a great place to go into like a meditative space.
Yeah,
those endurance activities, because it's just. It comes like a pranayamic breath work. Like your breathing comes very rhythmic, the movement's very rhythmic, the environment, the sounds, they're all the same. You know what I mean? So I can see how you go into that space with it.
And that's exactly one of the reasons why I love it. So whether it's a climb that I want to do, and I don't climb technically, but I'll pick a peak that I know that it's going to be a challenge and I have to push myself for. Whether it's a hill I want to run, or a distance that I want to swim, I'll challenge myself in those areas. Then, from a business perspective, the challenges these days have shifted for me in that, before when I was in corporate life, it was always about hitting the revenue, hitting the profit line, all of those different challenges, which were stretches, and figuring out ways to do that. For me now, it's helping clients figure out ways to hit their challenges.
Right.
So for now, it's how do I unlock the code for them to get to where they need to find their greatness? How do I unlock the code for this individual executive to unlock his greatness?
Yeah.
It's more of a cerebral thing for me now.
Yeah, for sure. So it's coming into an organization or working with a client and being like, okay, how do we get these guys to where they want to be without, even if they don't even know where they want to be yet.
Yeah.
Help them define that. So very cool. One last question I want to pose to you is, looking back now, you said you're in your 50s. If you had some advice to give to, say, the 20-something Bob Murray, what would you tell that young man?
The same thing I tell my kids, just chase your passion. Whatever you do, make sure that you love doing it. If you ever find yourself dreading getting up on Monday, if you ever find yourself that lunch is the most exciting part of the day, or that Friday is your happiest day of the week, then you're not chasing your passion, and it shouldn't be that way. We got to work for a long time, and when you're chasing your passion, one of the things I've discovered is that balance is easy, and balance is different for everybody.
Sure.
Not everybody's going to go off and do crazy athletic things that push the limits of their endurance. Relationships are better, you just generally are happier.
Yeah.
Versus if you're head down, tail up, chasing a dollar, you'll discover that you're always chasing a dollar, and that you will have frustrations in virtually every other area of your life. So, and I've been there, right? Chasing something so I could acquire the next thing.
Right.
And that, so you become a slave to that.
Yeah.
Versus the true happiness that comes from chasing your passion.
What if someone, says, I understand that, but I just don't know what my passion is. I don't know what that is. What kind of advice can you give to somebody like that? What do you do? You're stuck there.
I think that they need to disconnect and be by themselves and just go do some thinking, without thinking about, think, what's my passion? What's my passion? Just go for a long walk, go for a series of floats, just journal, think back on when those times in their life when they were the absolute happiest. What were they doing? And there's keys and there's clues in there that's going to help them unlock that.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Very cool. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on. This
Mike,
was great.
Thank you.
Very,
it was
very
great.
entertaining. I think that kind of blew by. That was an hour and 5 minutes. That
Holy
felt
cow.
very quick.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Those are great questions.
Awesome. No, thank you. So it's robert-murray.com, robert-murray.com, and also leader-within.com. This is his venture with Heather White. It's Robert S. Murray on Twitter and Robert S. Murray on Facebook, and check him out on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for coming on Vancouver Real.
My pleasure.
Maybe we'll have you back in a little bit of time to just, dive into all this stuff a bit more. It was really fun. So
Excellent.
Thank you very much. And until next time, to whatever is. Thank you.